Thank you for joining today's webinar featuring Webcor Builders. During this presentation, all lines will remain muted to preserve the quality of the recording. All questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. If you have a question at any time, please use the question box on the right side and our team will answer them shortly. We will also have a recorded version of this presentation ready to share tomorrow. Now let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, Assemble Systems Product Manager Tim Kelly and Peter Sosnowski from Webcor Builder. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Samira. Today, this is really Peter's show, and I'll let him get started in just a minute, but a little bit about myself. I actually come from the construction industry with a degree in construction science from A&M, and most of my time spent in the construction space was actually using model data and reporting on information in the field, a lot like what Peter's talking about today. So as we go through this information and talk about Assemble and how Webcor is using Assemble, a lot of my experience before joining the Assemble team was around aggregating information coming out of model systems and ultimately reporting to our project team on that. And Peter is actually with Webcor and in my mind the thought leader across the VDC space and processes used, and their organization is doing some very interesting things that I think Peter's going to dig into a bit today. Peter, do you want to talk a bit about yourself as well?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Tim and Samira. Welcome, everybody. I should mention right off the bat, I'm not a professional presenter, but I'm trying to do my best to kind of share our experience using technology in construction, specifically use of Assemble in our workflow. And as far as myself, I have been at Webcor for about 10 years. Currently, I work as a Preconstruction Director, which means I get to work with estimating and pre-construction teams, clients, subcontractors. It's a dispersed team, therefore communication has to be exceptional when you arrive at design and you need to generate a full and complete estimate, ensure you've got a proper coverage for the project. So I've adopted naturally a technology because that's a great way of communicating and a great way of visualizing the information that ultimately will be built in the field. So since I've been at Webcor for about 10 years, I had a chance to work in multiple departments, starting in self-perform, concrete division, moved on to the virtual building group, and now I'm in the pre-construction group rolling out to operations soon. I've been involved with a lot of initiatives, both on corporate and project level, to roll out these processes to various teams, and we see certain things work and certain things doesn't. But as far as Assemble, it's been a fairly easy and natural adoption for us. One of our friendly contractors from Midwest has introduced us to Assemble about 2 years ago. We have adopted it, rolled it out, and I want to say right now we've got about 150 to 200 users throughout the company. We have both the experts who generate the content and generate the models that we use, and also we have a lot of BIM-enabled people who are not technically savvy. Maybe they've got expertise in different areas, but they are the ones who consume the content and they can adopt Assemble workflows. So that's been a great success for us. As far as agenda, hey, maybe I'll back to you so you can walk us through it.
I'll go ahead and just to cover the agenda really quickly. I'm going to do just a brief introduction of the system and how our product is used today, and then allow Peter to really take the show and introduce Webcor if you guys aren't familiar with the organization, and then talk about a particular workflow and use case that they go through on a day-to-day basis. So with that said, for those of you that aren't familiar with Assemble, Assemble Systems is a web-based platform. Our product is Assemble Insight, and our solution offers model data management across your organization. So Assemble consumes models and the model data and allows you to visualize, group, sort, and filter your models and your set of models in any different way, and then share that across your project team. So as you load these models into Assemble, Peter's going to talk today about enabling other users that typically don't have access to the models or the authoring systems that create these models, and allowing them to consume this data in a lot of different ways. So I think our core focus is allowing people across your project team to, through a web browser, log in and get access to those model visuals and that data. That's really where we are today, and what we like to do is allow you to dig in and use or analyze that data. So with that said, Peter, do you want to kind of talk for a few about Webcor?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim. Webcor Builders, we are a general contractor headquarters in San Francisco, California. Been about 45 years in business. We have about 1,600 employees, doing about $1.5 billion in revenue. So kind of your large regional contractor, we kind of in the middle of the road, nationwide. We ranked in the top 50 contractors in the ENR, the 400 general contractors list, for a good dozen of years at least. And essentially, we have operations in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Hawaii. Types of projects that we get to be involved with are typically, our bread and butter are, high-rise construction in San Francisco, Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. Essentially, residential projects, hospitality, tight sites. We also have a lot of expertise in office, commercial, some expertise in cultural work such as museum, sports facilities, and also educational, as well as our biggest project today, the Trans-Bay Transit Center, which is going to change the way transportation works in the Bay Area. The project I want to specifically focus on today, as an example of how we use Assemble, is our student housing project for UC Berkeley. That project has just entered construction phase. We've been in pre-construction for the past 9 to 12 months. Work with a very sophisticated design team that works in 3D for a majority of their design scopes. So that was nice to see. The project's about 185,000 square feet. It will be completed in about 20 months. Nice project, nice case study. Allow us to roll out some of the technology, get the design team involved, get the owner involved, our subcontractors, and really collaborate as a larger team to get to arrive at the right GMP for the client. I should start with kind of go back to what Tim mentioned. The way Assemble, I think that the source of the success of Assemble is that this is a web-based software. Just like a Gmail, to check your email, you log into a website, you access your information. Same with Assemble. Essentially, the Revit models get posted or published through Revit link to a website. Projects can be organized into many different ways. The way we do it is that we publish one project for one building, and into that project we publish multiple models. We oftentimes receive these models from design teams. The industry has advanced very rapidly over the past several years, and not only that we get more models, but the quality of the models has also increased. However, the models are not contract documents. We still bind it by contract to two-dimensional plans and PDFs. Oftentimes those are extracted from the models, naturally. But our job wouldn't be complete if we haven't checked these models for accuracy and compliance with these design documents. So when we first get those design documents, which are now listed here, design models, which are listed in the upper left corner, between the structural model, architectural model, MEP model, even landscape model for this case, our first step is to QC whether this content of the model actually matches the content of the documents. Oftentimes we check for actual content, whether everything that's shown in 2D is in fact present in 3D model. We look for modeling techniques, making sure that the walls are not modeled from footings to roof, but in fact they're broken up per level, exactly the way they will be built in the field. And we also check for naming conventions of the model elements. We want to make sure that all the schedules that are posted to the plans contains the labels and tags that are again present in the model. If the answers are yes in those three instances, we can start using those models. For visualizing the scope, we can use them for extracting the information, extracting quantities. We can organize the model with using assembled properties into many different ways, which I'm going to get into in a minute. However, oftentimes we see that not the entire design intent is represented in 3D. So between us, call it fixing these models or making proper modifications, and also building the so-called gap models, which are the scope that may not be represented in 3D. For example, site utilities or site excavation, construction-related activities. We then build these models in-house with our staff or with consulting BIM firms out there. And ultimately, we post the complete set of models to one project that represents the entire design intent that now, as a whole body of work, we can look into, we can use for our downstream uses. So that's just want to reiterate the fact that it happens very rarely that we can take design models right away from Uforma or any posting site from designer and just start using them. Assemble allows us to post the data, visualize it, allows us to invite multiple team members of our team, our schedulers, our PMs, our design team and owners, and collaborate on that platform. So that's the first step. Then in the second step, we want to see. Oh, so go ahead, Tim.
And Peter, I just as you're talking there about gap models, I want to iterate or reiterate that as an organization, Webcor has determined that there is enough value across the life cycle to create those models in-house when something isn't in the design model. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? You guys are building out additional models to fill out the scope for all those uses?
Absolutely. So, in this instance, we were in pre-construction for, call it 12 months. We saw 3 to 4 major milestone deliverables between conceptual design, schematical design development, and CDs. Ultimately, design is never, fixed, never rigid. We make design team and owner makes design decisions. We have to interpret those design decisions and put a number to it. And oftentimes, our numbers can influence the design development. So, as you can see here, the design intent, the intent for use of Assemble is to use Assemble throughout the entire design cycle. Start posting and creating these models both by design team and ours, and essentially keep them updated throughout design development. So you can probably quite see the versions, but Assemble has a way of allowing for version control, which means that if I get a model from design team, I can post it, and when I get it for the second time, I can override it. I can always go back to previous versions, and I can always see the last version as default view. Same goes to our gap models. Our gap models typically built from scratch the first time, and then they simply get updated as design develops and the content changes. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. So now as we start designing, analyzing the design and reviewing the scope, one of the automatic side benefits to rolling out Assemble was that, anybody can access it. All you need to have is a computer browser and a username. You don't need your IT team design or install expensive software on your computer. You don't need months of training to use it. So we started seeing some of the non-technical stuff kind of naturally drawn to Assemble. They can view it, they can analyze it, and they can understand the changes with our help or just by themselves. So in this view, you can see that's our typical process when the new design is posted. We take those models, export them from Revit to Assemble, and we host it on Assemble. Assemble allows us to do kind of a multi-layer analysis. Number one, we can isolate certain scopes. You can isolate scope by any Revit property that's out there, and that could vary from a category to family type to level, location. Essentially, you can shrink down the scope to what you want to see, to what you want to analyze. In this instance, I'm showing just the roof level, try to understand what had happened to roofs since we saw it last time. And Assemble allows us to essentially overlay the 3D models, which, in the old days, that was only available through a light table 10 years ago, and maybe with a Bluebeam now. Take the two sheets and overlay them, understand the differences. but never that we had a tool that allowed us to overlay the two models and highlight the changes, identify what has been modified. Now, the models themselves, just a freestanding model, is overwhelming. It's a lot of information to look at and absorb all at once. We often stare at drawing sets that have 1,000 pages that have been extracted from these models. So just to view one image and try to understand everything is very challenging. So often we rely on filtering abilities that you can generate through visibility settings that I'm kind of showing this square box here. I'm only looking at the structural models here, and I'm only looking at the roof level to be able to see the changes. And also I can, at the variances, in the variance section, I can also filter what I want to see. If I want to see only added scope or removed scope or changed scope only, I can check off those boxes, or I can check them all on and try to absorb it. Not only that I can see everything visually, but Assemble automatically generates a quantity variance. So I can see the scope and quantity for the first model, from the second model, and I can see the change. And oftentimes when we get these models, everything lights up. The art of using Assemble is to actually hone in on the scope that's important to you, that you want to review, and not to try to get overwhelmed by the data, but rather really hone in and use the tools that Assemble provides to be able to make informed design decisions, communicate your findings to your subcontractors, maybe display that information through our internal takeoffs or bid tabs that we distribute to our staffs, and ultimately reflect that back in our estimate to the client, and truly stand behind the data that we can see, that we can analyze, and that we can report back to the client.
Yeah, and I'll add, when I was using Assemble prior on a project, one of the biggest benefits for us was communicating this information of a change of a bulletin issue to our trades, and that we would essentially sit down with each of our different trades and pull up this revision, what was changed. And for example, I would have the ceiling subcontractor come in. We would filter it just as you talked about, down to just his scope of work, and then show the changes, and he could very, very quickly understand exactly what changes were made, and then take the documents and go from there. Rather than, as you talked about before, doing an overlay of all these different things, taking the time to overlay every drawing and then try and understand the changes from there. It allowed him to very quickly understand and dig in.
That's exactly right. We see it here at Webcor, since we provide professional construction, pre-construction services, that this is the homework that we have to do before we even distribute documents out to the subs, and definitely before we receive the bids, updated bids and budgets back from them. Ultimately, once new design gets issued, it's our job really to analyze the changes, understand them, communicate that to the rest of the team, and make sure that we can stand behind the information that we're sending back to the client. Ultimately, the data that we are capturing needs to be actionable and needs to be informative.
Yeah.
In the next step, because we always have to keep kind of at the end process end goal in mind while we work through all these steps. Ultimately, we use Assemble, and we use the models, and we use obviously the drawings to understand design intent, and ultimately price the job. Arrive at the budget for the entire project that we can stand behind, that we can build with, and we have to hold it essentially through every design development. So we started migrating from our processes using Assemble, from simply viewing the information, providing access to it, and we started organizing this information in a logical fashion that then matched the content of our estimate. So the data transfer from Assemble can be seamless as you move from Assemble to your estimating platform. In our instance, we use the WinEst from Trimble. So we started adopting the Assemble properties, which is something that I think Assemble rolled out about a year ago, which is a set of tools or set of fields that each model element can be assigned an information with. For example, here in this view, I'm showing content of the exterior framing essentially we pre-built all of the bid packages and we'll move them directly into Assemble. So I can see concrete, exterior framing, this metal, swing screen panel, so on and so forth. But then what we do is we tag each of those model elements and assign them to appropriate bid package. So that allows us, for example, to separate all the interior partition walls from the exterior partition walls, because I may choose to decide to put out 2 bid packages out there, and I can select 2 different sets of groups to bid on that different scope. So I guess the objective, the reason we do it is that we try to make informative data and try to organize information in a way that means something to us, means something to our subcontractors. We group like objects into categories. I think that's the second screenshot right here. Now that I've got my bid packages, I can now roll out that grouping, which had 64,000 square feet of wall, and I can understand now, okay, what is this bid package made out of? Which types of the exterior metal framing actually belong there? So that's my big list of all the exterior wall types between 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, with square footage for each of those types. At the same time, I'm making sure that I haven't missed anything yet. Making sure that I've included every single exterior wall type that is part of this project. Make sure that I don't have any holes in the exterior bid package. So I was able to achieve that by simply tagging each of the wall elements with 2 different tags. One with a name of the wall by its ID, and a second with the bid package. Essentially, Assemble has this functionality where you can group model elements and create different schedules depending how you want to see the job. If you want to organize something by level, then by the bid package, then by wall type, you can do it. If you want to reverse it and organize the data in a different format, you can do it as well. It's essentially a concept of revit schedules, but reorganized and rolled out in a very efficient, user-friendly way. And did you have experience grouping model in that way? Maybe there's something that I haven't mentioned yet that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to also mention that with Assemble properties, those can be any properties you want them to be. So you have the flexibility of adding other data sets for your different departments, and then beyond that, grouping at those individual levels. So if you wanted to add, a specific code structure that is maybe part of your pre-construction department or purchasing, you could add in that, and just like your conditioning for bid packages, add those codes as well, and then group that at any level. So you have flexibility there beyond what's in the model and what you're receiving out of those design models. You can beyond just creating project parameters in Revit, you have the ability to create these Assemble properties.
Exactly. Also, one thing to mention is that before Assemble properties were available, we were doing a lot of kind of a manual work inside of Revit. We would create kind of our own custom fields to be able to tag items with specific information. So we found ourselves working Revit a lot. These days, our workflow is moving towards Assemble, where we can publish very raw models into Assemble and then work within the platform to organize the data and distribute scope into different bid packages or any other way you want to organize the data. Now, while there's no live link between a WinEst and Assemble yet, or perhaps other estimating software, what we can do is we can export that view that you can see on the screen right now, that schedule essentially, to Excel, and essentially that becomes our input document to WinEst. So it tends to optimize and streamline the data flow from one platform to the next. And we're looking forward to even better connectivity between various software. And to kind of continue talking about the Assemble properties, this is yet another view and another use of Assemble properties. Same project, I'm showing architectural model now, and essentially the same bid packages are listed. And one of the things that comes really handy, especially when you try to truly analyze and distinguish scopes, you may be thinking about job sequencing or scheduling. or make sure that you've got proper coverage for every single trade on the job, we started color coding some of these models as well, which is a fairly simple concept that stems from highlighting your plans with a highlighter. We can color code these models based on a building function, or again bid package, or type, mold type. But essentially, the intent behind it is that we tend to highlight our scope so we can see the clear differences between various trades building this job, and make sure that we have the full coverage. Some other assembly properties here, I guess I've added some more information. So we've got, we can start connecting our takeoffs and our estimates to a schedule, maybe to a certain bid package or group of items. We can start assigning the activity codes, so we can start filtering the information based on the scheduled activities. We can input comments and issues, such as maybe status the job. For example, if that particular bid package has already went out and we get the numbers back, and we selected low bidder, maybe that scope is now kind of going to the background because we have a full coverage for it. We know who's going to build it. Let's focus on something else. Oftentimes, we have to split this model into multiple so-called estimating locations. Distinguish the cost between the, say, garage portion to residential, between the maybe retail space. We have the ability to separate the scope into those 3 locations and report quantities on each of those locations to help our clients input that information into pro forma and make the decision on how to best program the space. And then finally, we can even transfer the data back from the estimate to assemble and list the cost of every scope as a kind of a reminder of how much each bid package may cost and what the unit rates might be. So just a lot of flexibility, a lot of data that can move back and forth between the 2 software, and just a very tremendously useful tool for communication purposes.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit about the cost information here, and that you talked very quickly about organizing or being able to break it down by area or potentially stage of the project. One of the interesting things I like is that you can either work at the unit cost, and as you apply that unit cost, it will go across all of the items you have selected and give you a total cost off of the unit of measure. Or you can work at the total cost and it'll break it down. So one of the, kind of talking through what you just mentioned there, is if you have a total cost coming from a subcontractor for a group of scope, you can group by that subcontractor, plug in that total cost, and then reorganize it by area and see the breakdown based on the quantities in each of those areas. So you have a lot of flexibility to do some kind of high-level analysis there across your project.
So, in closing, essentially Assemble has become our default VDC platform for viewing the models and sharing that information across our teams and departments. Essentially, since inception, about 2 years ago, again, we've got about 150 users, and I need to say we are approaching about 100 projects completed on Assemble. We keep on our main page only the active projects. Everything that's been completed and has been finished, we archive, which again is a nice feature because we can only we keep our focus on the active jobs, and we can always recall any past project that we've done. If there's been certain amount of information generated through Assemble, we can easily invite new team members as they join the teams. They have the benefit of seeing that information the second they join our team. So it becomes a very interesting workflow, where many team members can contribute to this process, and many team members can consume the data that we can produce. So with that, I perhaps would like to open to questions, if there's any, maybe exchange some experiences with some of the participants.
Perfect. Oh, what a great session, Peter. We definitely have quite a few questions that have come in. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible, and if we are not able to get to your question during today's session, we will reach out to you after the webinar. Peter, this is actually for you. Once you have done your quality control of the model versus what you have on the 2D drawings, have you made the model available to your subcontractors?
Yes, very good question. I'm a big believer of in sharing data and communicating our deliverables, not only internally but also externally. There are certain subcontractors out there who become more and more sophisticated, and they can use that information. There is no harm in passing the data on to them. In fact, it will allow us for faster estimating cycles. So I would encourage the entire industry to engage into more collaboration and sharing data. I would say this thing, I would say one thing though, while we try to do our best to condition these models the best we possibly can and build these new gap models the best we can by interpreting the design information, I'm sure there's errors that can sneak into our workflow. So we always pass on these models for reference only to be used by subcontractors that should also look into the quality control of these models, which is no different than us receiving these models from design teams and signing the BIM or CAD waivers. Unfortunately, these models are not design documents yet. They can serve as supplemental documents, yet they're very powerful, and we see greater communication, tighter budgets as a result of us sharing information.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, another question. How are you handling curtain wall systems in Assemble? Currently, it can be a bit cumbersome to view those systems. Are you using a gap model to get around that issue?
That's exactly right. In fact, this morning I was working on a project in South Bay where we've decided, after receiving the models from the design team and posting them to Assemble, we can see the line items, we can see the quantities, yet by clicking on the line item, the curtain wall does not quite light up in the model. So that's a kind of a concern to us because we want to make sure that whatever we select can visually see. That allows us to make sure that we don't miss anything and we can clearly visualize the scope. But in those instances, when we receive a model like that, we typically create a gap model and we essentially replace the fancy curtain wall by the design team that was designed for the purpose of generating 2D documents. We simply replace them with simple sheets of glass, if you will. And we tag each sheet of glass with a proper wall type ID. This way we can, again, visualize clearly where the wall is, and we can receive good quality quantities from the models. Those models are not used for coordination. They're simply used for for quality takeoff. So it's important to understand when you build a gap model, what's going to be the use and the purpose of that gap model. But that's how we work around the issue of the curtain wall in Assemble.
Yeah, and I'll add to that and say that that's something that we currently have as a known thing to enhance or address in our system is that curtain wall is a container family, if you will, in Revit, and that it contains a number of different families or types or instances, whether that's the mullions or panels or doors. And right now you like Peter said, you can grab the quantity but without visual representation of the entire system. And we need to be able to identify all of the items contained within that system family and have identified that as something to add to Assemble in the future.
Great. Thanks, Tim. I do have another question come in for you specifically, Tim. Can you push these properties created in Assemble back into Revit?
Today you can't. They're Assemble specific and created and contained only in Assemble. In the future, we will add the ability to create new project properties or parameters within Revit from these Assemble properties.
Perfect. Thanks. Next question. How do you add a new parameter to objects?
I can do it two different ways. So we can use the Assemble properties. Assemble has a list of, I want to say, 10 to 12 predefined properties that you can tag it with, which was that schedule ID, which was bit package, which was notes or comments. I understand that Assemble can build also custom properties for your clients, or you can create custom fields inside of Revit, and you can also tag information that way. Depending on your workflow, depending on your level of expertise, if you prefer working with Revit, you can use those fields and essentially assign information for every model element. or you can simply rely on assemble properties and do it right there in assemble.
Beautiful. Next question, gap modeling can be risky. Is your in-house gap modeling shared with subs? Which bid packages is gap modeling primarily being used for?
Mm-hmm. So, one of the best examples probably, so the gap, I would say the gap model can break into two different categories. One, building models from scratch. So that would be earthwork, shoring, for example. There's a shoring, piers, tiebacks, anything like that. It's just a great help to help. A great help to us is to model that scope so we can visualize with our internal teams, our superintendents. They can comment on it, and then sharing that information with our subs. The second example of a gap model is taking the architectural model, isolating certain scopes, for example, drywall, taking that drywall and modifying it, both by QCing the information, whether everything was modeled properly, making sure that there's no 2D elements on the plans that are not represented in the model, then splitting the walls, based on level, and then finally tagging it with a proper name. This way we can, organize walls into, functional categories, shaft wall, chase walls, the mising walls. We can categorize it into fire rating. We can tag that information in assemble. And just by simply, and then we can also assign another information, which is the location. Where's this wall live? Does it live in the residential part of the building or garage part of the building? We oftentimes, especially in the early stages of project development, it's not easy, especially in this market that's very hot, to get interest from subcontractors. So we try to collaborate with them more. We tend to create these schedules and extract the quantities and information from assemble, share that with the subs, or even sometimes invite them to our projects. We just believe that this will start a dialogue, will allow the subs to review the information we send them, validate it, maybe ask better questions because they have better information in front of them, and ultimately engage them that way in order to arrive at a better budget and provide better service to our clients.
Actually, a question just came up as a follow-up to what you just mentioned. How are you sharing the models with your sub?
Mm-hmm. We can either, we do it a couple different ways. For those sophisticated subs who use Revit, we essentially condition the models in Assemble, in Revit, and then in Assemble. We post everything to Assemble. If there's any final tweaks or modifications we need to do, we then push back the information from Assemble back to Revit. So now Revit is now fully QC conditioned model. And we share that model. We're just simply sharing the Revit model and asking them to perhaps sign a waiver. Then another way of inviting them is to perhaps either invite them to your own project, which we don't do it all that often, but we can set up a site assemble project for our subcontractor community, maybe with a certain number of targeted information that we want to distribute to the subs. So you can do it both through Assemble and both by publishing the Revit model.
Yeah, I'll add additionally, we actually have a relationship with, if you're using I²Foot to solicit bids, you can share read-only views of either just the geometry or the geometry and the data to your bidders in I²Foot, so you have that as another option as well.
Thanks, Tim. Actually, Tim, this is a question for you. We had a couple of questions come in regarding, will this only work with the Revit models or other authoring tools? So if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, today we actually provide support for Revit, AutoCAD Architecture, and AutoCAD MEP, and we're actually doing a new release here soon regarding AutoCAD, in that we'll be supporting the geometry fully. With other platforms such as either ArchiCAD or Tekla or others out there, we're actually doing a very big push right now to incorporate new geometry, new author formats. And if you have particular interest in that, let us know, and we'd love to talk to you and go through some details about how we want to consume that and what would support your project needs.
Perfect. Next question. Beside WinEst, what other estimating software is Assemble compatible with or will work with?
Yeah, so today we actually, our system, any of this data that Peter has talked about is actually exported to Excel. And so anything that can consume Excel format data or CSV data, you would be able to pull that in. We allow for custom, Peter talked a bit about the code structure that you can add to assembled properties, but additionally you have the ability to bring in into like your assembly code information, any custom cost code table. And that can come from, whether it's from WinEst or from Sage or whatever other system you might be using, you can pull that code structure in. And then as you organize your data within Assemble to those codes, then you can actually group or summarize by each of those individual codes to push that information out. So today we directly work with Excel. In the future we will more directly integrate with a few different systems.
Perfect. All right, next question. Is there any file conversion required, and if so, do we need a full license version of Revit needed for that conversion, or is it built into the Assemble platform?
Yeah, so our add-in, or today we actually use the authoring system to publish to Assemble, and so if you have a Revit file, you actually open that Revit file, and from within Revit you publish to Assemble.
Perfect. All right. Next question. This is actually for Peter. Has the use of Assemble allowed Webcor to engage more people into the BIM workflow?
Oh, absolutely. That's a lot of good question. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've got so-called, BIM experts and BIM enabled staff. The experts are your younger staff, kids coming out of college, participating in all those different BDC competitions. They come in with a lot of knowledge, and they can generate the content very, very quickly, very rapidly. They can adopt new modeling platforms. It's just amazing to see what can be done these days in our industry. So those don't need any convincing, right? Those actually just fall into tools like Assemble. However, the staff who has some experience working on our projects, working for different departments, they've got a tremendous amount of knowledge, and they've got a tremendous amount of information and feedback they can share with us, or the technology enabled people. But we had a hard time drawing them in older days. Yes. What Assemble allowed us to do is to engage those people and allow for the better exchange of information, the technical staff from the younger staff to the older staff, and then goes back in terms of proper construction knowledge to the younger crew. I recall specifically one meeting where we had a very seasoned estimator just looking at, just walking and stumbling into one of the conference rooms one time when we were reviewing one of the models that we received from the team, and he naturally started commenting on it and pointing out things that may not be modeled properly because he had certain thought in his mind what the project should look like by looking at 2D plans. And we got this tremendous amount of constructability feedback that we have recorded and published to our design team, and that we got further incorporated. So, that person just started using Assemble without even understanding he's using that tool, and that kind of allowed us to spread this tool across our organization. And out of 1,500 people, I believe we got about 600 office employees. A lot of them are kind of a support staff. So, 150 out of the 400 that are currently in operations is a pretty big percentage of people who are able to adopt the software without, again, any proper training or any great amount of experience or expertise. So it's been great success.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Peter. Tim, this is actually for you. Can you touch on some of the features of Assemble that sets it apart from other model evaluation platforms?
I think today Peter talked a little bit about a few of our differentiators in that across your different models you have the ability to bring in a number of models and group, sort, and filter them in any different way, add to that data, and then do it again. And so it really makes your data, as we're structured in a database format that's cloud-based, anyone can jump in across their project team and get to the information that's important to them. They can filter it down, create a view, and save that out so that others can get to that same information very quickly. One of the other big differentiators in my mind is the ability to drop in a new version of a file that you might receive from your design team and quickly show the changes across those models. And essentially, Peter talked about it just a second ago, open dialogue. I think of our system as something that allows for enhancing the communication, and that if you're looking at changes and you have issues with what's been changed or how it's been changed, you can quickly isolate or identify what those items are and start the conversation. One of the other things, and just one more point, is that we do also work, bi-directionally with both the authoring system, but with Revit and Excel. And Peter mentioned, conditioning data in Assemble, and that the model data that you actually can condition or change in Assemble can be synchronized back to Excel. And additionally, back to Revit. Additionally, you can push your grid data out to Excel, make changes there, and bring that back into your system. So that allows others that may just want to work in Excel and are not comfortable at all with model data to have access to that information and make an impact on that data set as well. So that in my mind is what is our big differentiator today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim. We'll go ahead and actually end on that note. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today. We really do appreciate you taking the time and actually joining us. And we want to thank all the attendees for attending today's webinar. We truly appreciate you spending some time getting to know more about Assemble as well as Webcor Builders. Now, as you guys exit the webinar, you will be asked to fill out a brief survey. Please take the time to answer a few questions and share some feedback with us. And hopefully we will see you again in another Assemble webinar. Take care and have a wonderful day.